There is a story told in many cultures about a person who kept storing grain in their barns year after year, terrified that famine would come. They built more barns, filled them higher, and guarded them fiercely. Yet while their barns grew full, their spirit grew empty. Fear kept them from ever enjoying their abundance. They lived in constant anxiety, always afraid of losing what they had, never free enough to share, never at peace enough to rest. In the end, they had accumulated plenty of resources, but experienced very little joy. This story is not just about ancient farmers, it is about many of us today. Whether it's money, possessions, time, or even love, we hoard because we fear there will never be enough. We clutch tightly to what we have, convinced that giving will leave us empty. But in reality, hoarding often leads to emptiness, while sharing leads to fullness. Scarcity is the root of hoarding. It whispers that if we let go of anything, we might never get it back. It convinces us that generosity is dangerous, that resources are fragile, and that security is found in accumulation. This is why people sometimes cling to money long past the point of usefulness, why they stockpile things they never use, or why they guard their time so fiercely that relationships suffer. Scarcity turns life into a fortress, with walls built to protect what we have. Yet those same walls often keep out joy, connection, and peace. Scarcity promises safety but delivers isolation. The shift begins when we embrace abundance. Abundance doesn't mean ignoring reality or denying the need for wise planning. It means trusting that resources flow, that opportunities multiply, and that generosity does not deplete but enriches. Abundance says, there is enough. I have enough. I am enough. This mindset frees us to share without fear, to release without anxiety, and to give with joy. Instead of building barns that rot with unused grain, we open our hands and discover that sharing not only blesses others, but also deepens our own sense of wealth. Think about relationships. Scarcity says, don't give too much love, too much forgiveness, too much attention, because people might take advantage of you. So we ration our affection, we calculate our kindness, and we keep score in friendships. Yet what happens? Relationships become transactional, shallow, and brittle. Abundance says, give freely. It doesn't mean allowing exploitation or ignoring boundaries. It means trusting that love expands when shared. The more appreciation, kindness, and compassion you pour into a relationship, the stronger it becomes. And the joy of connection grows not from how much you receive, but from how freely you give. The same principle applies to finances. Scarcity says, hold on to every dollar. If you share, you'll run out. That fear leads to tight fists, constant worry, and sometimes even greed. Abundance reframes money as a tool, not a master. Money is meant to flow, not just sit. When you share, through generosity, through supporting others, through investing in causes you believe in, you don't simply lose money, you gain meaning. You create ripple effects that come back to you in trust, relationships, and opportunities. History and research both show that generous people often experience greater satisfaction and even greater success, not because of luck, but because generosity builds networks of trust that open doors scarcity could never unlock. Generosity is not only about giving money or things, it is about giving of yourself. It is about sharing time with someone who needs company, offering encouragement when someone feels discouraged, lending skills to someone who is struggling. These acts don't leave you poorer. They leave you richer in relationships, richer in purpose, and richer in joy. Scarcity sees giving as subtraction. Abundance sees giving as multiplication. When you give encouragement, it doesn't diminish your own. It multiplies it in others. When you share your time, it doesn't destroy your schedule. It invests in memories and bonds that last. Why then do so many people cling to hoarding? Because fear is powerful. Many of us grew up with stories or experiences of not having enough. Perhaps there were seasons when money was tight, when love was scarce, or when opportunities seemed far away. These experiences can leave deep marks, creating a belief that safety is only found in storing, saving, and securing. While wisdom teaches us to prepare for the future, fear twists preparation into obsession. Saving becomes hoarding, planning becomes paralyzing, and security becomes an illusion. The irony is that no amount of hoarding can truly erase fear, because the fear is not about resources, but about trust. Trust is the bridge from hoarding to sharing. When you trust that you will be okay, even if you give, you can release with joy. When you trust that life provides second chances, new opportunities and surprising provisions, you don't cling to every dollar or every hour. You learn that sharing creates flow. Just like water, money and resources stagnate when hoarded, but refresh and multiply when circulated. And in that flow, both giver and receiver are enriched. There is also a deep psychological truth here. Giving activates joy. Studies show that acts of generosity trigger the release of dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals that enhance happiness and connection. That's why people often report feeling lighter after giving, why they describe generosity as energizing instead of draining. Scarcity tries to convince us that giving will leave us empty, but science and experience prove the opposite. Giving fills us. The joy of generosity is built into the human design. We were never meant to live as isolated hoarders, but as interconnected sharers. Consider also the ripple effect of generosity. A small act of sharing can multiply far beyond its original impact. A person who receives kindness often passes it on. A financial gift to someone in need can help them recover, which in turn allows them to help someone else later. Even words of encouragement can echo through a person's life, inspiring them to lift others. Hoarding keeps blessings locked away, but sharing sends them rippling outward, and often those ripples circle back to us in ways we never expected. Generosity also builds legacy. When people look back at our lives, they rarely remember the size of our bank accounts or the number of possessions we owned. What they remember is how we made them feel, how we supported them, how we shared what we had. A legacy built on hoarding fades quickly because possessions perish. A legacy built on sharing endures because its impact lives in people's hearts and stories. Abundance invites us to think beyond accumulation and toward contribution. Instead of asking, "How much can I gather?" abundance asks, "How much can I give?" Living generously does not mean ignoring boundaries or living recklessly. It does not mean giving beyond your means or ignoring your own needs. Abundance is balanced. It understands that in order to keep giving, you must also care for yourself. True generosity flows from a place of health, not exhaustion. That's why abundance includes wisdom in financial planning, self-care, and boundaries in relationships. Hoarding is driven by fear. Reckless giving is driven by insecurity. But generous living, rooted in abundance, is driven by trust and joy. So how do we begin to shift from hoarding to sharing? The first step is awareness. Notice the places in your life where fear has convinced you to clutch tightly. Is it in finances, where you save obsessively but never feel secure enough to give? Is it in relationships, where you hold back affection because you're afraid of rejection? Is it in your time, where you keep your schedule so guarded that there is no room for others? Awareness shines a light on scarcity, and once you see it, you can begin to choose differently. The second step is practice. Generosity grows through action. Start small. Share a kind word when you might have stayed silent. Give a small amount financially, even if it feels uncomfortable. Offer your time to someone without calculating what you'll get back. Each act rewires your brain, teaching it that giving does not destroy but builds. Over time, these practices shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance. The third step is reflection. After acts of sharing, pause to notice how you feel. Did you experience joy, connection, peace? Let those feelings reinforce the truth that generosity enriches, not depletes. Reflection strengthens the cycle of abundance, reminding you that giving is not loss but gain. Ultimately, the joy of living generously is not about having everything, but about realizing you already have enough to share. It is about replacing the heavy burden of hoarding with the lightness of trust. It is about discovering that the greatest wealth is not what we keep, but what we give. Scarcity keeps us small, fearful, and isolated. Abundance frees us to live large, joyful, and connected. When we stop hoarding and start sharing, we don't just change our own lives. We change the lives of those around us, creating ripples of joy that spread far beyond what we could imagine. The barns of scarcity are full but empty. The hands of abundance may give, but they are never empty for long. Because money, love, and opportunity flow where trust goes. And when we trust enough to share, we discover that generosity is not a duty, but a delight. The secret to a life that is not just rich in possessions, but rich in meaning, connection, and joy. Hoarding is not just a financial habit, it is a way of seeing the world. When we hoard, we're acting out of the belief that life is fragile, that the pie is small, and that if we don't secure enough for ourselves, we'll be left behind. This belief system shapes countless daily choices, from how we handle money to how we interact with people. It keeps us holding back, withholding, and walling ourselves off. On the surface, it might look like we are being wise and cautious, but beneath the surface, what often drives hoarding is fear. Fear of loss, fear of not being enough, fear of not being taken care of. And fear is a poor foundation for building a fulfilling life. When fear dominates, the results can be subtle but destructive. In finances, hoarding might look like saving far beyond what's healthy, refusing to ever invest, or living in a constant state of deprivation, even when resources are available. In relationships, hoarding can look like withholding affection, refusing to forgive, or keeping emotional distance to avoid vulnerability. In both areas, the outcome is the same. Life shrinks. You might feel safer, but you also feel lonelier, more anxious, and more disconnected. Hoarding is a prison with bars made of scarcity. Shifting to generosity requires a radical reframe. Instead of asking, "What will I lose if I share?" we begin asking, "What might grow if I share?" This question opens the door to possibility. Instead of focusing on subtraction, you begin to see multiplication. When you give your time, trust deepens. When you give your skills, opportunities expand. When you give money, lives are impacted, and often doors open for you in return. This is not magical thinking, it is the natural flow of generosity. Sharing creates movement, and movement creates growth. Take finances, for example. Scarcity-driven hoarding locks money away, terrified of loss. But money is a tool, not a treasure. When used wisely and shared generously, it multiplies in ways that hoarding cannot achieve. A person who invests in a business idea, supports a friend in need, or donates to a meaningful cause may not always see immediate financial return, but they often gain something more valuable: trust, networks, resilience, and joy. These intangible assets often lead to tangible opportunities later. Hoarding money may preserve it temporarily, but sharing money allows it to flow, to create, and to return multiplied in impact. The same principle applies to relationships. Hoarding love, giving it only when it feels safe, rationing it so you don't get hurt, creates shallow bonds. It keeps you in control, but also keeps you isolated. Sharing love freely, in the form of kindness, forgiveness, attention, and affection, creates strong bonds. It may feel risky, but it's also what gives life meaning. Nobody remembers the possessions you hoarded. They remember the love you shared. They remember the ways you made them feel seen, valued, and cared for. Scarcity-driven hoarding may protect your heart temporarily, but it robs you of the depth and richness that comes only through generous connection. Generosity is also a mindset that reshapes how we see opportunities. Scarcity says, "There's only one seat at the table. If someone else gets it, I lose." This belief drives competition, envy, and secrecy. Abundance says, "Opportunities are created, not consumed. If I share knowledge, ideas, or encouragement, I help create more seats at the table." People who think this way are magnets for collaboration. Others trust them, want to work with them, and open doors for them. Ironically, those who give freely of their knowledge often end up with more opportunities than those who guard every secret. Hoarding closes doors, sharing opens them. Another way generosity shifts our perspective is in how we handle mistakes and failures. Scarcity convinces us to hide them, to hoard our stories, to protect our image at all costs. Generosity encourages transparency. It says, "I'll share my lessons so others can learn." When we share our failures honestly, we give others courage to try. We create communities where growth is valued more than perfection. And we discover that by giving away our story, we actually gain more strength. Vulnerability shared creates trust, and trust is the currency of meaningful connection. So why does sharing bring joy while hoarding does not? The answer lies in how we are wired as humans. Generosity activates parts of the brain associated with pleasure and connection. When we give, we literally feel good. Hoarding, by contrast, activates fear centers, keeping us in a constant state of vigilance and stress. That's why generous people often describe themselves as happier, calmer, and more fulfilled. Not because they have more, but because they give more. Generosity aligns us with how we were designed to live, in community, in flow, and in trust. Practical steps toward generosity can begin small. Start by noticing where fear keeps you hoarding. Is it in money? Perhaps you can set aside a small percentage to give, even if it feels uncomfortable. Is it in relationships? Perhaps you can risk a little more openness, a little more forgiveness, a little more kindness. Is it in your time? Perhaps you can offer an hour to listen, to mentor, or to simply be present. Each act of sharing pushes back against scarcity. Each act rewires your brain to trust abundance. Generosity is not about recklessness or ignoring your own needs. It's about flow. A river that flows nourishes everything around it. A river that is dammed eventually becomes stagnant. Sharing keeps life flowing. This doesn't mean giving beyond your means or burning yourself out. It means choosing to keep resources moving, whether they are financial, emotional, or spiritual. Healthy generosity includes boundaries. You give in ways that are sustainable, trusting that as you share, more will flow back to you in time. It is also important to remember that generosity looks different for everyone. For some, it may mean financial giving. For others, it may mean sharing wisdom, encouragement, or skills. For others still, it may mean offering presence, time, or forgiveness. The point is not how much you give, but that you share freely from what you have. Abundance is not measured by the size of the gift, but by the spirit in which it is given. Generosity also transforms how we see wealth. Scarcity defines wealth only in terms of what is accumulated, how much is in the bank, how many assets are owned. Abundance defines wealth in terms of flow, how resources move through us to bless others and ourselves. A person with little who shares freely may live a wealthier life than a millionaire who hoards. Because true wealth is not about possession, it is about participation in the cycle of giving and receiving. When you stop hoarding and start sharing, you discover that wealth is not a static number, but a dynamic experience. One of the greatest barriers to generosity is the belief that we must wait until we have enough to start giving. Scarcity always sets the bar higher. I'll give when I have more time. I'll share when I have more money. I'll open up when I feel more secure. But that moment rarely comes. Abundance flips the script. I give now from what I already have, trusting that it is enough. Generosity is not about waiting for a future abundance. It is about acting from a present abundance. And often it is the very act of sharing that reveals just how much we already have. Generosity also cultivates resilience. When you share, you build networks of trust. You create relationships where help flows both ways. Then when hard times come, you are not alone. Scarcity-driven hoarding isolates you, leaving you to face challenges alone. Generosity-driven sharing embeds you in a web of support, where what you've given often comes back multiplied in your time of need. The joy of generosity is not just in the giving, but also in the knowledge that you are part of a larger flow of care. Living generously also shapes legacy. People rarely remember how much someone earned or saved, but they never forget how someone gave. The neighbor who always had time to help, the mentor who shared wisdom freely, the parent who gave love unconditionally. These are the legacies that endure. Hoarded possessions eventually disperse, but shared generosity echoes through generations. Choosing generosity today is choosing the story people will tell tomorrow. Generosity also strengthens self-trust. Every time you give, you affirm to yourself that you have enough to share. This reinforces abundance and breaks scarcity's lie that you are one step away from running out. With each act of sharing, you tell your subconscious, I am not lacking, I am overflowing. Over time, this rewiring changes how you see every aspect of life. You stop scanning for what's missing and start celebrating what's present. You stop asking, what if I don't have enough? And start asking, how can I use what I have well? That shift alone brings profound peace. Ultimately, the joy of living generously is about freedom. Hoarding keeps you bound to fear. Sharing sets you free to live fully. Generosity frees you from the obsession with self-preservation and opens you to the adventure of contribution. It transforms your relationship with money, with people, and with yourself. You begin to see that life is not a zero-sum game, but a flowing river. And when you let go, when you share, you join the current of abundance. In every act of generosity, there is a reminder. Joy is not in what we keep, but in what we release. Scarcity will always whisper that you might run out. Abundance will always respond that by sharing, you will always have enough. And when you live with that trust, when you stop hoarding and start sharing, you discover the joy that was waiting all along, the joy of living generously. Generosity is often spoken of as if it were a virtue reserved for saints or for the wealthy, something nice to do once life feels stable and secure. But in truth, generosity is not about waiting until you have enough. It is about recognizing that you already have something to share. It is about refusing to let scarcity dictate your life and choosing instead to let abundance flow through you. And the surprising truth is that when you share, you not only enrich others, you enrich yourself. The joy of living generously is a joy that hoarding can never provide. Hoarding convinces us that safety comes from accumulation. It whispers that the more we stockpile, money, possessions, even affection, the safer we'll be. Yet the paradox is that hoarding often increases fear. The more we cling, the more we fear losing. The more we store, the more we worry it won't last. Hoarding makes us prisoners of our possessions, guarding them instead of enjoying them. It makes us suspicious of others, worried they will take what we've secured. It isolates us in a fortress of our own making. And while the barns of hoarding may be full, the hearts of hoarders are often empty. Sharing breaks that cycle. Sharing is an act of trust. It says, I believe there will be enough. I believe I will be okay, even if I let go. I believe abundance grows when it flows. Sharing doesn't deny the need for wisdom or planning. It doesn't mean giving recklessly or ignoring your own responsibilities. It means choosing to open your hands rather than close them. And when your hands open, your heart opens too. That openness invites joy, connection, and freedom. The joy of generosity is visible in countless ways. Think of the smile on a friend's face when you give them your time, really listening instead of rushing. Think of the relief in someone's eyes when you offer support during their struggle. Think of the ripple effect created when you give financially to a cause that changes lives. These moments don't deplete you, they fill you. They remind you that wealth is not measured only in what you possess, but in what you contribute. They show you that life is richest not when barns are full, but when blessings are shared. Generosity also changes your identity. Scarcity defines you as a taker, someone who must constantly protect what little you have. Abundance defines you as a giver, someone who has enough to overflow. When you live as a giver, you carry yourself differently. You walk with confidence, knowing you have something valuable to offer. You stop obsessing over what others can take from you and start focusing on what you can give to them. This shift creates dignity and self-respect because it affirms that your life is not defined by fear, but by contribution. There is also freedom in letting go of comparison. Scarcity feeds comparison. They have more, so I must protect what I have. Hoarding is fueled by the endless game of measuring yourself against others. Generosity breaks the game entirely. When you share, you stop competing. You begin to celebrate others' success because you no longer see their abundance as a threat to yours. Instead, you see the interconnectedness of life, that what blesses them ultimately blesses you too, because abundance is not a zero-sum game. This mindset releases you from envy and replaces it with joy. Generosity also strengthens relationships in a way hoarding never can. People are drawn to those who give freely of themselves, whether it's time, encouragement, or resources. Generosity builds trust, and trust is the foundation of every meaningful connection. When people know you are not holding back, when they sense that you are willing to share without keeping score, they feel safe with you. They open up more, collaborate more, and invest more in the relationship. Hoarding isolates, generosity connects, and connection is one of the deepest human needs. On a practical level, generosity also creates opportunities. The person who gives freely of knowledge, encouragement, or resources becomes someone others want to work with, promote, and support. Generosity signals abundance, and abundance attracts abundance. This doesn't mean every act of giving will result in a direct reward, but over time, generosity builds a reputation that opens doors scarcity could never unlock. Opportunities flow toward those who create flow for others. This is why communities built on generosity thrive, while those built on hoarding eventually wither. It is important to remember that generosity is not only about money. Some of the most powerful gifts cost nothing. A listening ear, a kind word, a patient presence. These are forms of generosity that ripple deeply through relationships. Financial giving is valuable, but it is only one dimension. True generosity is a posture of the heart, a willingness to give from whatever abundance you have, whether it's time, talent, wisdom, or resources. The point is not the size of the gift, but the spirit in which it is given. Scarcity will always argue that you must wait. Wait until you have more money. Wait until you have more time. Wait until you feel safer. But abundance insists that now is enough. You already have something you can share today. The very act of sharing today is what builds the trust and flow that create more for tomorrow. Generosity is not the result of abundance, it is the path to abundance. By living generously now, you step into the flow of abundance that scarcity could never access. The joy of generosity also lies in the legacy it creates. What we hoard will eventually disappear. Money gets spent, possessions wear out, even tightly guarded time slips away, but what we share endures. A kind word may be remembered for decades. A financial gift may change the trajectory of a family. A moment of presence may heal a wound someone carries for years. These legacies outlast us, echoing in lives long after we're gone. Hoarding leaves barns that rot, sharing leaves stories that live on. Generosity also deepens gratitude. When you give, you become more aware of how much you have to give. Sharing magnifies appreciation. Instead of focusing on what you lack, you notice what you possess, and how much more you have than you realized. Gratitude and generosity form a cycle. The more grateful you are, the more you give. The more you give, the more grateful you become. Together, they create joy that scarcity cannot touch. Perhaps the greatest joy of generosity is the peace it brings. Hoarding keeps you restless, always worried about protecting what you've stored. Sharing keeps you calm, because you are no longer controlled by fear. You know that even if you give, you will still be okay. You know that life is not about clinging, but about flowing. You know that your worth is not tied to what you hold, but to what you release. This peace is a wealth far greater than money. It is the richness of a life free from fear, defined by trust. The invitation, then, is clear. Stop hoarding, start sharing. Release the fear that drives you to cling. Step into the abundance that frees you to give. Start small if you must. Share a kind word, a bit of time, a small gift. Let each act build momentum, teaching your heart that generosity is not depletion, but multiplication. With each act, you will feel lighter. With each act, you will discover joy. And with each act, you will join the current of abundance that keeps flowing and growing. Here is the conclusion. Hoarding promises security, but delivers emptiness. Sharing feels risky, but delivers joy. Generosity is not a luxury of the rich. It is the birthright of everyone who chooses abundance over scarcity. It is not something you wait to practice until you have more. It is the very practice that reveals you already have enough. The barns of scarcity will always rot, but the gifts of generosity will always ripple outward. When you stop hoarding and start sharing, you discover the secret to a life not only secure, but joyful, not only wealthy, but meaningful. And here is the call to action. Begin today. Look at your life and ask, what can I share? Maybe it's money, maybe it's time, maybe it's encouragement. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start where you are, with what you have. Practice generosity daily, and watch how it transforms not only those you bless, but also your own heart. If this message resonates with you, subscribe to Think Fresh Daily, share this content with someone who needs hope, and join a community committed to abundance, generosity, and joy. Together, we can stop hoarding, start sharing, and discover the deep joy